so you can play.
MiniWarGaming's The World Engine!
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and it's time for a Storytime Interlude for the World Engine 40K narrative campaign. Now hopefully you've already watched the first part of this campaign that was posted on Thursday. If you haven't, go back and watch that, otherwise a lot of this isn't going to make too much sense. In today's interlude, basically the interludes are designed to give you more background of the characters or the forces that you see conflicting in our 40K or our narrative campaigns overall. And they're totally optional. You could skip this and just keep watching the rest of the missions and you'd be able to follow along well enough. But if you really want to get into the backstory of what is going on, then that's what these interludes are for. So they're extra story to get you even more meat that go with the potatoes of the battle reports. So today's interlude is going to be all about how Overlord Knum came to be the master, or the pharaoh, of a rather large Necron dynasty. Or in this case, conquered several other dynasties. Because at the last time that we saw him in the Fate of Fayoum campaign, his homeworld of Fayoum was destroyed by the Tyranids. The Tyranids managed to overrun it. The Necrons howled as well as they could, but thanks to a civil war started by Knum, they just didn't have the strength necessary to withstand the Tyranids and eventually were overrun. Now, during this campaign where the Tyranids were invading Fayoum, Knum rose to power. What had happened, if you didn't watch the campaign, is that he was just one of the overlords, or one of the many lords that was in the dynasty that Overlord Sobek was the pharaoh of. And he was sent on a bit of a suicide mission to actually board some of the hive ships and destroy them from within before they could send down more reinforcements. A lot of the other Necron forces that tried to do this failed, but Knum actually succeeded. Now, when he succeeded, though, it was at the cost of all the forces that were with him. The mission itself was actually quite tremendously close. It came down to one tachyon arrow being fired and hitting the synaptic control nerve center of the ship, and that downing the ship and actually disrupting a lot of the fleet. As it turned out, the ship that he was on was a Synapse ship, so it controls a lot of the other ones. But as that ship went down, he kind of wormed his way into one of the spore pods, the mycetic spore pods, and got shot out, and he landed on the planet that way, which kind of caused some damage to him. In fact, it disrupted a bit of his neural circuits and disrupted a bit of his programming. And afterwards, he decided that he should be in charge because Sobek wasn't doing a very good job of fending off the Tyranids. In fact, he was even a bit of a coward and running from a lot of the combats that were happening. And so with the help of a Haruspex that he captured in a Tesseract vault that he then released on a Sobek, while Sobek was distracted by an assassination attempt from some of the Tyranids who were trying to decapitate the head so that they could more easily destroy the defenses of Fayoum, so they could feast on the biomass of the planet itself, because the planet was not a dead planet, it was a jungle planet. But after Sobek's death, Knum came out and assumed control. Now this control wasn't easily won because there was a bit of a civil war, as those loyal to Sobek wanted to get in there and try to repair his reanimation chambers and get him back to life again. But Knum managed to quell that rebellion and take control of the entire Tomb World just as it was destroyed by the Tyranids. Knum escaped though, because in the very last mission that we saw in the Fate of Fayoum, he managed to push the Tyranids off of basically one of the spaceports, one of the places where he could launch some ships. But they had caused too much damage for him to be able to do a counterattack, so instead he took a craft with as many people or as many Necrons as he could and escaped the consumption of the world. So he swore revenge against the Tyranid fleet, and he all of a sudden looked at the High Fleet Charon as being his main nemesis, and he wanted to destroy them. However, he was didn't really have any strength. There was just him and a small group of forces and the one craft that he was able to get out with. So while his ship floated through the cold void that exists between systems, an Eldar ship suddenly appeared. Knum, of course, readied his defenses, his paltry defenses, and was about to blast it out of space. But when he looked at it closer, he realized it was a scout ship, and furthermore, it actually hailed him. And so either thanks to the programming that was damaged, or just maybe pure luck, he decided to actually respond. And who should appear on the screen but an Eldar Farseer. Now this Eldar Farseer actually addressed Knum by name, and then introduced himself as Farseer Athenar. And he brought a message that he had seen the future, and they had seen a way for Knum to rise to power and be able to crush the High Fleet Charon, the High Fleet that destroyed his homeworld, so that he could get the revenge that he wanted and the power that he wanted. Now, even Knum wasn't damaged enough to trust a Farseer. And so he questioned the Farseer about why he should not only trust their mortal enemy, the Eldar, but a Farseer who are known to be tricky and who are known to kind of coerce other races into doing what they want for their own gain. The Farseer admitted that his purposes were not altruistic. He wasn't there just because he cared for the Necrons and wanted to help them, but that he cared for his own craft world, and that in the future that he's seen, if the High Fleet Charon were to go unchecked, that it would eventually cross the path of this craft world and either destroy it or decimate it when it attacks, and if the Eldar were able to hold them off, it would be at the cost of too many lives. And so instead he saw in his future that if Knum were to rise to power and acquire access to a certain world engine, which we'll talk about in a second, that he would be able to use it to destroy the High Fleet. And so he asked, in return for the Farseer to help him by seeing in the future so he can conquer all of his enemies and become one of the greatest pharaohs ever known, that he then uses the world engine, which we'll get to in a second, to destroy the High Fleet and then hunt down every last splinter. Knum, of course, liked the sound of that because it's what he wanted to do anyways, and so he agreed. Now, the one thing that was really going to make the difference was this world engine. Now, what is a world engine? A world engine is basically a tomb world that's been powered on to the point where it can actually fly. So the entire world would all of a sudden just move and it could go from system to system. There was a campaign heard of a long time ago where there was a world engine that required several Space Marine chapters worth of ships, and it cost the lives of an entire Space Marine chapter to stop that world engine when they were able to board it. So obviously these things are to be reckoned with. And so if he's able to activate one, not only could he destroy the High Fleet with ease, but he would become a superpower, and in the sector and beyond. And so his ambitions, of course, were there. And so what happened next was a tremendously ambitious and successful campaign of conquest. And Knum slowly but surely subjugated dynasty after dynasty, tomb world after tomb world, thanks to the help of the Farseer's ability to see into the future. And so he was able to even conquer the tomb worlds that were much stronger than him because he was able to outthink and outsmart his opponents. And so while he did this, he actually came across a small scout force of the High Fleet Charon, and it was just, in his anger, just destroyed it outright, but not before he took several specimens for him to investigate. Now, the reason that he wanted to do that is because in one of the tomb worlds that he conquered, the tomb world was actually infected by the Flare virus. And the Flare virus, if you don't know, is a virus that rewrites the programming inside of a Necron brain, or their neural pathways, whatever happens to be, to make them think that they're actually still alive, rather than in their metal forms. And since they're still alive, they start to hunger after food and drink, even though their body can't do anything with it. They just chomp it and it kind of just falls out. And they even start to take the flesh from their enemies and try to put it on themselves so that they look like they are living. Of course, it doesn't really help to do that. It just helps to make them look horrifying. And so he took the advantage of taking those Tyranids and actually incorporated parts of those Tyranids into his own. Like, he had all these augmentations done because of how much he was obsessed with destroying these Tyranids. And he had help from yet another very powerful being, and that is Illuminor Caesaris. Illuminor Caesaris is a very famous cryptech. He was actually the one responsible for helping the Necrons become the Necrons. And he still works to this day to try to unlock all the secrets of life, because he's obsessed with immortality, and he's obsessed with becoming the perfect, powerful being. And in order to do this, he captures subjects from different species and he experiments on them in order to unlock everything that makes life tick. And so one of the recent things that he's been very interested in is, of course, the Tyranids. They are new to this galaxy, and they seem to have the ability to regenerate, to modify themselves rapidly. And even when you kill one, he's able to just be reincarnated into the High Fleet. And so all these things make them a very interesting subject for Caesaris. So he actually contacts Knum during this decade of conquest, where he's just conquering everything, and he offers his services. And his services, of course, is he's an expert cryptech and is able to augment Necrons just to ways that they would never be able to do because of everything he's learned from studying all these other species. So he offers his services there in exchange for access to live Tyranid specimens that of course would come from Knum attacking the Tyranids. And so Knum's happy to have him there. In fact, Caesarus performs a lot of augmentations on Knum himself, even helps to, much to the disgust of Caesarus, but he's willing to do it because he just needs to get access to these things. He even helped to attach the Tyranid carapaces and all that to Knum himself so that he could look even more horrifying, even though obviously it won't have any real effect on the Tyranids themselves. Now, during this conquest, his latest conquest was against Overlord Khepri, who we saw in the first mission, and his Unas dynasty. And that ended with the capture and control of the Mighty World Engine. Now, this Mighty World Engine, though, wasn't just ready to go. You don't flick a switch and all of a sudden you're gone. It was still in disrepair from the millions of years that it sat, and it's so dormant, but it was the one that had the most potential to actually be activated and used for those intents. So with that, Knum summoned cryptex from all sorts of dynasties that he was now a pharaoh over. He is in control of a huge Necron fleet now, and billions upon billions of Necron warriors. They've become a superpower in that part of the galaxy. And they are now working on the reactivation of this world engine. And should he succeed in reactivating this world engine, not only will he become a superpower in that sector, but it could become something even beyond and cost the lives of who knows how much of the Imperium and who knows what other species as well. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned this Thursday for more story time and more missions. And happy wargaming.
MiniWarGaming's the world engine.